Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you the last of the recent reads videos for 2021. We all know I'm slow on here with these recent reads videos, but it just is what it is. It is what it is, but I like posting them because I like letting you know everything that I think about the books that I'm reading. So let's just jump right in and get through this. The first book I'm going to be talking about is The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. In this book, we essentially follow this family whose matriarch reaches out to them and is like, I am going to die. Please come collect your inheritance. And so a bunch of them end up going to the house where they grew up, and they're trying to figure out what exactly their inheritance is. So there's magic in here. There is a mystery because the family is trying to figure out like where the magic even came from, and it seems like their matriarch is running away from something, so they're trying to figure out what exactly she's running away from. And so that's kind of the story we follow. So I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. This read exactly like a classic Latin American novel. It literally brought me back to my high school days, which is interesting because, as some of you may know, I grew up in Puerto Rico and I primarily read in English, and I'm not a great reader in Spanish. And so in my high school days, I did not particularly like reading classics. It really wasn't my vibe, mostly because I couldn't understand the language as easily as I could understand English. Again, irony, because grew up in Puerto Rico, first language is Spanish. Regardless, this novel made me realize, though, that I like Latin American approaches to storytelling, because this book reminded me exactly of a classic, but I could easily understand it, easily follow it, was easily invested in it. And I think largely that's because it's written in English, so I could understand the language perfectly. And so I was perfectly okay with the common, how do I say this, deviations from the main narrative that the story took and the general pacing of the novel. I could enjoy that and thoroughly appreciate it and admire the language choice in a way that's difficult for me to do in Spanish. So my point being here that this was like everything I wanted my reading experience when I was in high school to be. And so I just loved it. I really enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed just the way this was written. It was just really good. I would highly recommend it. And it is a magical realism novel, which, again, if y'all have been here for a while, y'all know I am a hoe for that shit. I love it. So I just am so happy I picked up this book. It took me a while to read it, but I'm okay with that because I really wanted to savor the story. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Iron Widow by Ziran J. Shao. I hope I said their name correctly. If I didn't, I apologize. So this is a YA sci-fi fantasy where we have these huge mechanical robots that are piloted by a girl and a boy. But the boy is, in essence, using the girl as an external battery because they eventually die in this process of piloting these huge robots. And the girls are usually called concubines. So we follow our main character, Setien, whose sister has died as part of joining the army and becoming a concubine. And so she decides to enlist in order to get her revenge. And so we follow her on that journey. So I gave this, I'm pretty confident I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I had my problems with it, but overall, I thought it was a really good and enjoyable novel. The primary reason is because I love me some feral girls, and Setien is as feral as you can get, okay? She's feral, she's vindictive, and she's not afraid of taking action. And all of that combined is like perfection for me. I'm like, I love you. Thank you for existing. Thank you for being in my life. And so overall, I just had such a fun time with this. And one of my major complaints is entwined with one of my favorite things about this book, which in essence, we have a polyamorous trio in this book. But even though they are all precious and I love them and adore them and I think they're extremely cute, I feel like we did not get enough development for how far they progressed in this book. I was just left wanting a little bit more substance before there was this huge, like, oh my god, I love you so much, or whatever. That was my only complaint. But otherwise, I really enjoy the dynamics of the trio because we have our feral girl, we have our pretty boy who's smart but mostly is just pretty and sweet, and then we have another vicious killer but who is actually a very, 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 very big softie on the inside. And those are just dynamics that we 100% stand on this channel. Anyway, let me see if in my review I have anything else to say. So I don't actually have a review, and my journal entries on Storygraph do not serve me in any way. So at this point, I'm wishing I still had easy access to the conversation I had with Steph from Coffee Over Apples about this book, because I know I had more thoughts. But for now, just know that I saw some flaws in the book, but overall, it was really, really, really a pleasant reading experience, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel, and I hope that the sequel will be a 5 stars. I really, really think it might be a 5 stars, so crossing my fingers. The next book we're going to be talking about is Noopiming by an author that I really don't want to butcher her name, because for some reason I really, really struggle with it. I really don't even understand why. Anyway, this one is hard to describe, so I'm going to read the summary. And I can't remember how to say all the names of these characters, so I'm going to mention the ones that I actually know how to pronounce and omit the ones that I don't. The protagonist lies frozen in the ice, remembering a long ago time of hopeless connection and now finding freedom and solace in isolated suspension. They introduce us to the 7 main characters. Akuenzi, the old man who represents the narrator's well. Ninaktik, the maple tree who represents their lungs. Mindimuye, the old woman who represents their conscience. Sabe, the giant who represents their marrow. Adik, the caribou who represents their nervous system. Essen, the human who represents their eyes and ears. And Lucy, the human who represents their brain. Each attempts to commune with the unnatural urban settler world, a world of SpongeBob Band-Aids, Ziploc baggies, backpacks, and coffee mugs emblazoned with institutional logos. And each searches out the natural world only to discover those pockets that still exist are owned, contained, counted, and consumed. Caught off from nature, the characters are cut off from their natural selves. Now, this is one that I did not rate because this is one of those books that is an experience. You pick it up, you read it, and you are having an experience, and not even necessarily an experience you fully comprehend, because this is written in, it's like prose, but it's also poetry. And if you pick up a physical copy, you will see that there are some pages that literally only have one line on each page. And I don't know how to describe it except as an experience. I thought it was wonderful, but I know for a fact that I need to reread it in order to get more from it, because this is by a First Nations author, and I know for a fact that she put so much into this novel that I did not even scratch the surface of, because I don't fully have the background information I need in order to catch everything. And in general, I think her writing requires rereading. So I will leave this as something I'm looking forward to picking up again and thoroughly engaging with. And I will also leave it as something that I would highly recommend all of you to check out if you're looking for a reading experience that is more challenging, in the sense that literally you will probably not get everything that's going on, but also if you're looking to expand your ideas of what a novel can be, what shape it can take, and how you can explore themes in different ways in narrative fiction. So, let's move on to the next book. So, I'm going to talk about this book, even though it was the last book I finished in the year first, because I want to finish off this video with the romance reads. Since usually I make my own separate videos of romance books, but this time I'm not doing that because it's only 2 books. Anyway, so the book I'm going to talk about first is Assata An Autobiography. So this one took me a really long time to read, because I started it as part of my clinicals last semester, and my students were reading it for their class. So obviously I had to read it as well. But I was kind of keeping pace with them. And once I stopped doing my hours, I got wrapped up and busy with finals and other things. So it took me a while to pick this back up in order to finish it. But I did, and I gave this, I think, 4 stars. I really, really think this is an incredible autobiography, and it still very much speaks to things happening today. Like, there is so much that she says in this book that I'm like, that is still an issue today. That is still something we're dealing with right now. And that is still something that we need to continue to improve. So I would highly encourage all of you to pick up this autobiography of a Black revolutionary. She was part of the Black Panthers and then part of the Black Liberation Army, and she went eventually to Cuba to avoid persecution. We still assume that she is there, and in this we basically follow her life from her teenage years to her experiences being incarcerated and eventually escaping prison. I think that's the broad strokes of everything I want to say about this one. Truly, just check it out for yourselves. Now, as for the romances, the first one I'm going to talk about is The Toy King by Adriana Herrera. Last year, I think I started the year with the first book in this mini-series where we essentially follow toy makers in general. And the first one had to do with Santa, and we have a female Santa. And this one, we essentially follow one of the inheritors of the title of like the wise men or the 3 kings. And so it's just a smutty erotica where the guy is supposed to pick up the fiance of his older brother, but then they suddenly realize they have the hots for each other, and so they pursue that. By the way, it's not really cheating because it's kind of like an arranged marriage situation. She hasn't even met her potential fiance, so like don't think that those are the dynamics. They're really not. So I gave this 3 stars. It was not my favorite, but it was still a fun, smutty time. In general, I just enjoyed the reading experience, and even though I thought it would be, I don't know, something a little bit more, something a little bit just right there up my alley. It wasn't, but I would still recommend it as a Christmassy read. I just think that mainly the thing that made it not entirely for me was some of the kinks. I mean, it was interesting and fun to read, but I couldn't get into it, if that makes any sense at all. So, do with that mini review as you will. The last book I'm going to be talking about is actually one I mentioned in the previous video I just posted, but that basically I just wanted to confirm that I finished it, is Moonstruck by Onley James. In this one, we follow it's a series where in each book we follow one of the siblings in this family of psychopaths, and essentially they each fall into obsession in the book with a guy, and you follow that romance or that instant obsession as it progresses. So this is the third book in that series, and it will be the last book I read in this series. Honestly, even though I really enjoyed the smut in this book and I enjoyed the character dynamics of the main couple, I just cannot continue with the insertions of a side plot that makes me very uncomfortable and that for me reads like incest, even though it is not biological incest. If you want more information about that, please check out my previous recent reads video where I talk about romance books. I will have it up in the cards above for you to check out. I just cannot deal with continued conversations about that, so I will have to let this series go. But it was good while it lasted, and I'm going to be sad that I can't continue to enjoy these really smutty, obnoxious romances because I vibe with them. I vibe with their chaotic energy, even though they're repetitive, even though the plot of each one is basically the same thing over and over again. I don't care. I will miss it. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will have the links to that down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.